In the town of Culver, Indiana, just south of Lake Michigan, is the rural Culver Masonic Cemetery, home to not only most of the locals who have passed, but also many immigrants who made their way here from around the world. One of these graves belongs to a Swedish immigrant, a well-known Titanic survivor named August Wennerstrom. August Wennerstrom is an interesting person to dive into, with dramatic stories both on and off of the ship. To start with, Wennerstrom wasn't even his real name. August was born as August Edvard Andersson on April 24, 1884 in Ystad, Sweden. Now, my apologies in advance, there's a lot of Swedish names in there, so I'm sorry if my pronunciation is sometimes a little off. I haven't had to speak Swedish in 9 years. He moved to Malmö, where he worked as a journalist as well as a political activist, publishing a militant socialist journal in 1905 called the Gula Faran, or the Yellow Danger, a name which he adopted as his own moniker as well. His journal, of course, was meant to agitate society and criticized Christianity as a whole, as well as several public Swedish figures, and even went so far as to call King Oscar II, the then Swedish monarch, the King of Thieves. That, as well as other activities that he was involved in, led to him being charged with crimes against the state, but he was acquitted after the blame was placed on somebody else. He then worked as a printer, but with the controversies of 1905 still lingering over him some years later, he decided it was too politically hot for him to stay in Sweden. In 1912, he decided to immigrate to the United States, leaving behind a child that he had to be raised by its single mother. August booked passage on the Titanic under the name of August Wennerstrom rather than Andersson, borrowing the last name from his friend, future Swedish Minister of War Ivar Wennerstrom. He traveled from Copenhagen to England, boarding the Titanic in Southampton on April 10, 1912, and traveled in third class. During the voyage, he seems to have mingled mostly with the 112 Swedish passengers in third class, and became close friends with a few of them. His cabin mate was fellow Swede and fellow socialist named Gunnar Tenglund. On the evening of April 14th, as the cold of the North Atlantic fell and blanketed the Titanic as she made her way across the ocean, a party was thrown in the third-class general room. August and his friends were in attendance, and they likely enjoyed the piano music that was playing, but not too much, of course. After the party, he and his cabin mate returned to their bunks and were asleep before 11:30. When the ship struck the iceberg at 11:40, August and Gunnar, berthed in the lower forward part of the ship, were so close to the impact that they were violently woken up by it. A steward knocked on their door and told them to get dressed and assemble with the rest of the passengers. They didn't need to be told twice. They were out the door quickly and made their way to the third-class smoke room. There, he and his friends idled for a while. They listened to music, but August was notably annoyed that the bar was closed. Then a group of Italians came into the room, and they were frantic and panicked. Chances are they probably witnessed the rumored flooding up forward. August and his friends actually ended up poking fun at these Italians, chiding them for their fears and panic, riling them up even more while the ship's stewards were trying to calm them down. Many of the third-class passengers stayed in the third-class smoke room and general room, which were right next to each other. But on multiple occasions during the sinking, Father Thomas Biles, a priest traveling in second class along with 2 other priests, actually broke into third class on multiple occasions and led many different passengers out of the assembly areas and led them up to the boat deck. It's probable that August and his friends followed one of those crowds led by the priest, but he didn't specify. The timing does match up, however. He managed to get up onto the boat deck just as the last lifeboats were leaving the ship. His friend Gunnar ended up getting into one of those boats when August wasn't watching, and he left his friend behind. August looked around, unconcerned as the ship was going down by the head and the last of the boats made their way from the ship. He stood there calmly, smoking a cigar, and then he returned down below to the third-class general areas. A couple of women, presumably fellow Swedes, met up with him, and they didn't have any lifebelts. So rather than taking them down below to the third-class cabins where they all had assigned lifebelts, August led them up into first class where they happened upon one of the premium first-class suites, and it was unlocked. August found a couple of life belts in there and he took them for the girls. But he also found a very large stash of jewelry and money. Now, he later claims that he didn't take anything from it, and even made a point to explain how trivial wealth is at a time like this, but he somehow gave a fairly detailed accounting of every item that was there. Returning to the boat deck and seeming to have left the girls behind somewhere along the way, August found that every last lifeboat had left the ship, save for the 2 collapsibles at the forward, lower end of the boat deck. At this time, he noted a crowd of about 100 or so people congregated in prayer around those priests, the same priests mentioned earlier who may have helped him get out of third class and up to the boat deck. Well, he took the time to disapprove of their prayers to God at a time like this, describing them later as pathetic. As the ship began to give way, Wennerstrom met up with 2 of his friends, a married Swedish couple named Edvard and Ellen Lindell, as well as a young mother traveling alone with her 4 young children. This was Alma Paulsson. Their only hope was one of the collapsibles up forward, and August pushed through the crowd to get his friends into one of those boats. At this point of the story, he actually gives multiple versions of what happened, of how he came upon Collapsible A on the forward starboard side of the Titanic. Now, we know from history, from many other accounts, that it was Titanic's officers who had gotten Collapsible A off of the officers' quarters down onto the boat deck and were trying to attach it to the falls and lower it from the davits when Titanic sank out from under them. However, in August's first telling of the story, which was published in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, he explained that it was he himself who came across Collapsible A, sitting there, still all lashed up, and he ordered 3 men to come and help him, and the 4 of them managed to get Collapsible A over the side. That's clearly an exaggeration. What we do know is that Mrs. Paulsson and her 4 children did not make it. Not a single one of them survived. August and the Lindells did manage to make it into the boat, but as the ship dropped out from under them, it nearly flipped over, dumping everyone inside of the boat out into the water. August and Edvard managed to climb back on board when the boat righted itself, but Ellen flailed in the water. Wennerstrom tried to pull Ellen up by the hand into the boat, and he struggled for what he claimed was a half hour, until finally she succumbed and sank beneath the waves, following the Titanic. Her gold wedding ring came off of her hand as she sank, and August managed to hold on to it somehow. August reluctantly turned to his friend Edvard to tell him the news that he couldn't save his wife, but he was already dead. Now, Edvard was 35 or so years old, but August described him as being so gray and shriveled that he looked 90 or 100 years old. August survived the sinking, having been picked up by the Carpathia and being taken to New York. There he stayed free of charge at the Salvation Army's cadet school, but he accused them of mismanaging their funds and embezzling. Despite the accusations, they still gave him $25 to cover his train ticket out to Chicago, which was his original destination. The American Red Cross also gave him $100 to help him get on his feet. On his way out to Chicago, August took a quick detour in Culver, Indiana. That is where a Titanic victim actually had family, and August wanted to deliver the news about their passing himself. As he stepped off of the train, he was actually mistaken for somebody else. So nearby is the Culver Military Academy, and they were waiting for a new employee who was coming in by train, and they had a crowd of people there to welcome him. This new guy was named Leo. When August stepped off of the train, they somehow thought he was Leo. I don't know how that happened, but they thought it was him. And August just rolled with it, and took the name Leo, and took the job. The original Leo seems to have vanished and never showed up. August ended up keeping the name Wennerstrom, which wasn't originally his, and now he's working at a job that wasn't originally his. And he also ended up keeping the nickname of Leo for the rest of his life. It's in his obituary. Sometime along the way, he met his future wife, Naomi, and they ended up settling down in Culver and having 7 kids, which makes 8 if you count the one left behind in Sweden, which as far as I'm aware he never had communication with again. August eventually worked his way up to be superintendent of the Culver Military Academy. The rest of his life wasn't without tragedy. A local 1922 Culver newspaper said that he was involved in a terrible car accident. The article was critical of him, saying that his survival on the Titanic had made him too confident in his luck, and he was known as a reckless driver in that area. August was driving along with his friend and his friend's 2 children, ages 5 and 15, sitting in the front seat. He took a blind crest way too fast and ended up slamming into a concrete post. The car was wrecked, everyone was thrown out of it, and the 5-year-old was lost. August stayed in Culver with his wife, growing older and giving an annual presentation on the Titanic, sharing the broad strokes of the story as well as his own personal experiences. He died on November 21st, 1950. He's buried here in the Masonic Cemetery in Culver, Indiana. His wife Naomi, who passed in 1977, is buried with him.
We got a storm coming in. It's already starting to rain. We're gonna get out of here. But before we do,
thank you for taking the time with me to dive into the story of August Wennerstrom, this well-known Titanic survivor. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos like this or other videos made by real Titanic historians and published authors.